Ross
Cool.
McGibbon, welcome to the podcast. Second time.
Pete, thanks for having me. It's good to be back for round two.
Man, my pleasure. So what have you been up to in the meantime? I had you on probably, a year and a half ago, talking about what you do. So tell us a bit about yourself and what you've been up to.
Well, I guess you could class me as a herpetological photographer, and anyone who doesn't understand that term, it just means reptiles.
It's not medical. It's not medical.
It's not medical. It just means reptiles and amphibians. So that's what I specialise in. I guess I class myself as a wildlife photographer, but I mainly specialise in reptiles. That's my niche.
To sort of pause you there, does it always seem to me like a really stupid term, herpetology, to mean lizards and frogs or amphibians,
Yeah.
but it doesn't include birds, which are technically inside of reptilia, right? Reptiles and crocodiles as well. I don't know, crocodiles probably count. I guess they're reptiles. They're in there as well, but birds are more closely related to lizards and snakes than they are to crocodiles, I think, or it might be the other way around, but I know it's a bit weird.
You might be talking about dinosaurs there where, there was a big sort of, truth bomb dropped on the world some years ago about, everyone thought that, reptiles were the closest living descendants of dinosaurs, obviously because they look a lot similar and look like they haven't evolved that much. So everyone was thinking, big claim to fame, reptiles are the closest living thing to dinosaurs, and actually birds are a lot closer. So,
well, they are. They're descended from them directly. So
yes.
It's pretty crazy, right? You would have had thousands and thousands of dinosaur species only 65 million years ago.
Yep.
The asteroid hits and they just go through a massive bottleneck where all these species die. And we literally have a single species that survived and became diversified into birds that are modern birds.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, what have you been up to in the meantime? How have you been surviving lockdown and COVID in WA? You probably escaped the brunt of it, right?
Well, yeah, I got away since I spoke to you last year, one of the major trips I did was Arizona. So I got over to Arizona photographing rattlesnakes and Gila monsters, and, which are, one of the, there used to be only two venomous lizards, and one was the Gila monster, and it was very famous because of that. And now that with all the research coming out, they're starting to find that Komodo dragons are venomous, and
I think all goannas now technically.
Technically, but they're still arguing what defines venom, and I don't really try and get involved in in the arguments and the science too much. I just sort of wait for it to filter down to us. Reptile enthusiasts, and then I sort of make my assumptions from there based on, what's actually proven and what's just hearsay, So
how was the trip to the US? Was that your first time going to the US?
Not first time going to the US, but first time actually going over there to photograph reptiles, which was really cool. And I was going over with a mate who's been to Arizona and to the US to photograph probably 3 times before, so he kind of knew it very well. And it was awesome just to get, someone familiar with all the spots, and we just got out there and went hard for about a week straight, and then went on to Vegas.
Well, I've heard it's crazy over there. I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast, and I'm not sure. I think there was an Australian guy. Yeah, it would have been an Australian guy who was getting interviewed, and he was like, everyone gives Australia a hard time about the snakes and everything. And he's like, man, I lived there and I've seen 2 in my life. And then he's like, but the moment I step off the plane in America and I go to Arizona, I've seen 33 rattlesnakes in the period of 2 weeks. And he's just like, this place is screwed up. There's more snakes than you can shake a stick at. And you guys are terrified of Australia. So how was it trying to find rattlesnakes?
Oh, it was actually super hot when we went. So the perfect times for us were like early morning, late afternoon, and then at night time. So fortunately, through the warmer months, their snakes are more active, but they're more active at night, which, not a lot of people are out and about walking around the Arizona desert at night. But we
were. If you're Breaking Bad, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Making blue meth.
Yeah, doing something sketchy. So, mate, it was amazing. We really cleaned up over there. A lot of the species list that we were after we found, and I wrote a really cool article about it, which is just been released in the Australian Herpetological Society's publication called the Red Belly Courier. I don't know if a lot of your audience probably wouldn't know that publication, but it's an annual thing that the reptile community gets behind every year, and it's kind of like what everyone's been doing, and it's full of great articles. So I'll give that a little bit of a plug if there's anyone out there into reptiles. Look up that publication.
Well, you've nailed it, right? With your photography skills, becoming more and more, I think, renowned in Australia, at least with herpetological species. You've been on quite a few magazine front covers and book front covers. You've been really crushing it recently, haven't you?
Yeah. A lot of publications likes to use me for free photos. So yeah.
We can talk more about that later on.
Yeah. No, it is one of those things that I'm glad I have a day job as a firefighter, because it's not really something you can make a living out of, just because it is such a specialised and such a niche market. But it's always humbling to me when anyone buys a print or wants to see my work in a magazine or something like that. So a lot of it I just do for free and just get it out there.
They are incredible shots, though. I mean, you guys hopefully have seen Ross's work from the last podcast that we did, and hopefully you went and checked out his website and photos and products and everything. But what goes into nailing a photo of a reptile, especially a very venomous reptile that is potentially, deadly?
Well, first thing you got to do is go out and find it. So I don't photograph any captive stuff, or I do a lot of snake catching on the side as well. Relocating snakes from people's homes. But I'm a bit of a purist in my photography, and it means a lot more to me to go out there and find the animal in the wild and photograph the wild species that I have put so much effort into finding. So, that starts off with researching the animal, figuring out its habits, knowing as much as I can about it, going out to the wild, wherever that is in Australia, and then tracking that species down and hopefully taking a good shot of it before it disappears.
It's sort of like bow hunting versus using a rifle, right? You've got to really go out there, creep up on the animal. It requires a heap of skills rather than just see it, point and shoot.
Yeah, usually, snakes and reptiles are so cryptic, and that's why you were saying before that your mate, only saw 2 snakes while he was living here. And that's because they survive by being hidden and secretive. So, I either have to find them at night time where they're crossing a road or something like that by driving up and down a road, or I have to get out there on foot. And, unless you really know what you're doing and what you're looking for, it's pretty hard to find snakes on foot. But, yeah.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because you always seem to come up with the, you come up with the good stuff when you go on these trips. But do people seem to appreciate just how many hours of driving or walking or hiking or searching have actually gone into the probably, several minutes that you might have with this, beautiful, really rare to see animal in front of the camera, and you've got to sort of make it all work, because we only ever see the final product, right?
Exactly. You only ever see my successful hunts where, all the unsuccessful photos, they get deleted and they never see social media. And, all the times where I've gone for a species and targeted that particular species, then not found it, you guys don't get to see. So, yeah, you guys just get to see the good stuff. So I try and keep that coming, and
seems like 100% hit rate, right? It's like, oh, Ross went out again and nailed it, and you're just like, yeah, that was actually the 10th trip this week, or to try and find this snake.
Exactly. Only earlier this year, I found a desert death adder, which is one of our 9 species of death adder in Australia, and it was the last one I had to find, sort of to tick off all of those species. But it took me about 13 tries, for whatever reason, the times you go to the right habitat and it would be the wrong time of year, or it would be just a cold patch of weather where they weren't active, or sometimes it would be perfect weather and perfect conditions, perfect habitat, and for some reason they just weren't moving that night. So, it's pretty soul destroying when you drive halfway across the country. I think the most I drove to find it was into Alice Springs and around the West MacDonnell Ranges.
Yep.
And got there, and a bushfire had gone through there 2 weeks prior and just leveled the place, and nothing was active. And it was just really, really heartbreaking when you look forward to that trip all year and then you get there and it's the habitat's destroyed or something like that. So,
Well, did that take place like whilst you were driving out there, or that was like a recent thing that you just obviously had no way of knowing about?
just a recent thing that went through. It was probably 2 weeks prior to me getting there. It had ripped through there and nothing was still burning. So, it had sort of finished 2 weeks before I got there. But yeah, everything was charcoal. So, everything was probably hiding or underground or, just deciding to bunker down and wait for things to get better,
Far out. And so what goes into planning a trip like that, though? So say that you want to get this perfect shot of a death adder.
Mm-hmm.
How does one go about getting themselves to the end product of being in front of the death adder, taking a beautiful shot of it? Like, how much is behind the scenes there?
Well, some of it, a lot of it is pre-planning and knowing what you're going for and where you're going and everything. So I've got to do a lot of research, A, about the species, but B, just on Google Maps and locations. So I'm speaking to other people that have found them before, and I'm doing as much research as I can so that when I go out there, I haven't driven, my average 6-week trip, I'll probably do about 17,000 Ks.
That's like halfway around Australia. It's the circumference of Australia, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty full on. So, doing that amount of distance and using all my annual leave for a trip like that, it's a big investment. So yeah. I need to make sure that when I do go out and embark on those trips, I'm going with as much information and as much location details as possible. And then when I get out there, it's really a matter, you're at the mercy of the conditions. So if the weather swings on you and it gets too cold and you're after a nocturnal species, then you've got very little chance of finding it if it's a cold night and you're looking for a snake that's active at night.
And are you normally targeting multiple ones just to sort of hedge your bets and hope that, okay, if I miss one, at least I've got some other ones up my sleeve that hopefully will be there?
Yeah, like I'll go, if I plan a 6-week trip, I'll have a list of like 50 species or something that I'm trying to find, or 30 species, and basically you've got your main targets at the top, and they're what you're basing your trip around. So if I need to drive to Darwin for a really rare species of snake, which I have done in the past, I'll be going for that snake, and then everything else for those 4 days that I'm looking for that species is a bonus.
Man, this is starting to sound more and more like the Pokemon video game. Were you into that as a kid? I don't know if I've asked you that before.
No, but you're not the first person to make that sort of correlation. And I've actually been out. I got quite, I don't know what the right word to use, not offended, but it was just like a really weird experience when I was up in Darwin and I was looking for frillneck lizards in a park, and some weirdo came up to me and asked me if I was there for the Pokemon.
Oh, Pokemon Go.
Yeah, Pokemon Go. Where people were actually going to real locations and then trying to find virtual Pokemons. And I was like, no, you idiot. I'm actually looking for a real animal in the wild. And he was like, I was like, oh, cool, man.
This is Pokemon Go in real life, yo.
Yeah. I'm like, and then I thought about it and I'm just like, this is what people could be doing with their time. They could actually be out there looking for real animals, photographing things that are right there in front of them that they would get a way better experience from, and here they are doing it virtually on their phone.
It's easier.
It's really weird. It was weird to me anyway, man. It was weird.
Yeah, I loved it. I always grew up on Pokemon. I was there when it first came out. I was just like, oh man, I don't know what it was, but I think that the fact that I'd had 2 parents as biologists, we used to go down to the beach or into the bush and be lifting stuff up, looking for animals and critters and all sorts of stuff, putting them in containers and taking them home. And I just loved Pokemon. But I had that sort of realization when I picked up bird photography, and I was like, this just feels like I'm playing Pokemon, but I'm not catching them or making them fight, right? Like I'm literally going out with a specific target, trying to get a good photo. And I'm like, it's like you get home, you go through it and you're like, yeah, I've got one.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but you can do the real thing. So I encourage people to actually take more of an interest in wildlife instead of virtual games.
Well, and what are the things that people don't understand about the differences between, say, bird photography or taking photos of their close relatives, snakes? Because I imagine there's a completely different skill set.
Well, there's probably a lot of similarities, and I don't really get too much into bird photography myself. I think that I don't know, you got to have a passion for what you're doing. And for me, I'm a hands-on guy, and I like to get, up close and personal with the stuff that I find. And bird photography is great in a way that you can go out in the wild. You can really appreciate nature. You can settle into one spot and wait for birds to come and fly into your zone.
Yeah.
And then you can take photos, and there's no hands-on, there's no interfering with the wildlife, nothing like that. Whereas, for me, I grew up catching snakes and lizards, and I'm fascinated by them. So I like to get hands-on. So, if there's a tiger snake over there, I'll go and catch it, and, and then I'll photograph it, or the other way around, because a lot of people don't really understand that with reptile photography, if you try and take photos of snakes, you're probably just going to get a bit of body in the long grass. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to actually get a photo of that snake, you've generally got to catch the animal and then put it into some short grass, so then you can take some photos of it. You know what I mean? Or get it to sort of sit there and realize that you're not a threat. And then that's where, snake handling and stuff comes into it. But obviously I don't advise the general public to do any of that. I'm a
take the photos of them in the grass. Yeah.
Just
from a distance with a bird photography lens.
With a bird photography lens. That's how the general public probably needs to interact with snakes. But for me, I'm a professional snake handler. I do this. I've done this my whole life. I do it professionally as well as for my own passion. So if there was no Facebook, if no one ever saw my photos, I'd still do it because I love it,
When people probably don't realize you're using a rather wide angle lens. And so the photos appear to be, it should have a little thing of like, subject is actually much closer to the camera than may appear at the bottom, right?
Yep. Well, I do. I specialize in wide angle photography. So I'm sometimes inches from the animal itself. And that takes a certain amount of understanding what you're doing so that you're not putting yourself in harm's way unnecessarily, especially with venomous species. But my style of photography is basically wide angle, so I can get all the habitat in the background, because I really like to tell that story of where the snake comes from as well. So you'll find that if anyone checks out my photos, you'll get a beautiful landscape photo with basically an animal in it, and that's the formula I sort of stick with.
I think that's one of the things people don't really respect about good photography until they start becoming photographers themselves, is just that you often have a subject in the photo, but then there'll be all of the broader context, which is sort of really subtle, but without that, it's kind of it wouldn't be the same photo, right? And so quite often you have these beautiful photos of, say, goannas on branches coming towards the camera, but you can also see, the sand and the dunes behind them, the sky, the clouds, everything like that. And you nail the flash. I always see, like, you have the wildlife flash going forward with the bright sun and sky usually in the back. So it looks like there is so much work that goes into getting those photos. Do you have to worry too much about the I guess you would say, ethics of manipulating or sort of holding the animal back from doing its thing when you're posing it or getting it, ready for a photo? What are your sort of constraints there?
When it comes to ethics, I think as long as you're not affecting the animal's survivability and you're not putting it under too much undue stress. Like if I go and catch a lizard, for that first brief moment, the lizard's going to think, "Oh, a predator has me,"
Yep.
And there are a lot of purists out there that would be like, no, completely hands off. If you interfere with the wildlife, then they just lose their mind at the thought of that sort of thing. But they don't understand that for reptile photography to actually come into the world, and for me to educate people about them and show people these animals, most of the time you have to catch the lizard, otherwise it's disappeared. Like I always try and photograph in situ if I can.
Yeah.
But it's very rarely what actually happens out there in the wild. Like if you see a snake in long grass, you've got seconds before it notices you and disappears. You know what I mean? So if there were no people like me out there doing reptile photography and actually catching and positioning the animal for a photograph, there would be no reptile photos in a book that you could look at and go, oh, that's what that animal looks like. So
when it's here's what the animal looks like from behind when it's running away.
Exactly. So if people want a blurry photo of a lizard disappearing, or a picture of 2 inches of snake in long grass where they can't tell what it is, then that's what happens if you have that purist mindset of, I'm not going to interfere with the animal.
So it is a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. So what you need to do in my position is get very good at learning the animal's behavior, knowing how to interact with it, how to handle it gently. And then I find that my subjects calm down very quickly when they realize that I'm actually not there to harm them. They get over that, if you catch a snake by the tail, it's going to flip out for a bit. And then if you do the right thing and you handle it correctly and gently and slowly, and you're moving slowly with the animal, they do tend to go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not getting eaten, I'm not getting attacked by a predator, it's not harming me, and they do calm down. And I've had a lot of reptiles get curious at me then. And then I've also had a lot just want to keep getting away. So
yeah, but I imagine too, if you lower your profile and you're lying down quite a lot for these photos, they're going to feel a lot less threatened because you're not this big ass, shadow thing in front of them. Correct.
So a lot of people don't realize that reptiles see us as large predators. So when I take my photos, I'm doing it for 2 reasons. I'm down on the ground, laying on my stomach, mostly to get the right perspective, because when humans walk around and observe the world from, a 6 foot high, depending on how tall you are,
5'9",
yeah, exactly. That perspective, you're used to looking down on small animals. So if I just walk up to an animal and I'm standing and I take a photo of a reptile, you're going to see what you would see if you just came across it. And that perspective isn't new and it's not different to anyone. Whereas if you get down on their level, you'll see that if you look at any of my photos, it's like I'm staring right into that animal's, soul from its level. So it would be like if you were another snake coming across a snake and it rears up in front of you, that's what you're going to see when you look.
I feel like a lot of them, especially the snakes, like the one over your left shoulder there, those photos where the snake is kind of sprung up and looks like it's about to strike. Yep. I feel like that must be the last thing billions of Australian rodents have ever seen.
Yeah. And it's also the last thing any human wants to see in real life as well. So, but if I can give them that perspective from a safe point of view, like I get a lot of people on my social media going, I'm glad it's you and not me. And secretly I'm going, yeah, me too. I'd rather be doing this in the wild than looking at it on social media. But for a lot of people, they don't have that option. So
that's always been my thing, man. I'm sort of like, I'll photograph pretty much everything, but fuck snakes and sharks. Like that can be someone else's job. Crocodiles too. Jesus Christ. Like
yeah. Exactly. But then you get people that are really passionate and they understand the animals, like
exactly
that to a level that the public don't understand. And then I can get so close to these animals because of the knowledge, the intimate knowledge I have about their behavior. So when you know what you're doing, your fear level and if you have understanding about the animal, your fear level drops. And a lot of people ask me, oh, aren't you terrified or aren't you scared? And I'm like, I don't get scared when I'm photographing venomous snakes because I know what I'm doing. I understand the animal, and there's really a lot less to fear than what the general public perceive venomous snakes to be like. And
we'll get into that in a bit. But before we switch up gears,